Okay, everyone, welcome to the first Wellness Wednesday talk. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me in this general discussion around coping with pandemic stress and burnout. I welcome your questions. I'm not sure if you've joined one of our broadcasts here at the Cardiac Rehab before, but on your screen, depending on what device you're using, there is a little icon with a question mark, so please click in there and type in your question. My colleague Michelle is here to help moderate, and she'll alert me to your questions so that we can address them live. So why I decided to offer my first online wellness Wednesday presentation. Well, first of all, I'm Sandy. I'm the social worker here at the Cardiac Rehab. I decided to start off Wellness Wednesdays with a presentation on coping with pandemic stress and burnout because this pandemic has been going on longer than any of us had expected. I myself remember thinking back in March, well, the kids will go back to school after Easter, but that didn't quite happen. And then I remember thinking, well, things will be back up and running by July, and that hasn't quite happened either, even though we are getting some good signs. So we're finding ourselves dealing with a prolonged experience of change and stress, and that can trigger a lot of different feelings, which we're going to talk about this morning. Mainly, it triggers a lot of stress, worry, anxiety, but we're also dealing as a community, a global community, with a level of burnout just by nature of how long this is lasting and the impact that these restrictions are having on our everyday habits and our everyday life. A social work colleague of mine did a similar presentation for her patient population, and she used this image that you see there on the screen of boats caught in a storm. And the analogy is that we're all in the same storm, but in different boats. This is a worldwide pandemic that we're all experiencing, but we are experiencing it in different ways. And this can be influenced by different factors such as our level of social supports, our own personal coping strategies, pre-existing situations and difficulties that we had prior to the pandemic, and even practical issues such as financial strain. So there may have been times over the past 4 months that have been more challenging for you. And just as the pandemic has gone through different stages or waves, so do we as humans as this continues and develops. I'd like to introduce you to the idea before we get started on the window of tolerance. This is a great visual to describe how stressful events impact us. And it refers to that kind of sweet spot, that optimal zone in the arousal state of our nervous system. This is where we are able to thrive in everyday life. That's the middle section of your screen that you see there. And this was developed by doctors Dan Siegel and Pat Ogden. And the way that they described this, this kind of sweet zone, this optimal zone, is us sailing within a river of well-being, where we're able to respond to all the challenges that comes our way, but we do that in a way that we're not thrown off course. And it's a good zone where, despite there being challenges, we're shifting our course to navigate those murky waters. But we can find ourselves outside of this desirable zone, and certainly COVID-19 has done that for us because it definitely qualifies as probably high up there in stressful situations. And what it does, the pandemic rather, is it can propel our nervous system into either hyper or hypo arousal state. So the top image shows what hyperarousal is, where our nervous system gets revved up, causing us to become really emotionally overreactive and quick to anger, quick to feeling overwhelmed, anxious. And of course, this is going to impact our bodies. Like, how, when you're experiencing these feelings, you're going to notice increases in your heart rate, faster, shallower breathing, elevated blood pressure, just to name a few. So this hyperarousal zone triggers that fight or flight that many of us are aware of. However, for others, even within the same stressful situation, it can trigger the hypoarousal. So that's the freeze response on the bottom of your screen there, where we shut down, we withdraw, we become depressed, disconnected. And this is also where we see some of that burnout that many people might be experiencing with COVID. And this can be a mental burnout as well as a physical, kind of hitting that wall. So the intention of our talk today is in part to help just normalize some of the feelings that you may have been experiencing over the past 4 months, and also give you some indicators as to when perhaps consider some extra support. When it comes to experiencing emotions, how we react and how we respond to them determines if they ease up or if they become more intense and persistent, which of course add to the stress. So we're going to be talking about how to build on your already existing coping strategies. I'm sure you have many of them that you've been leaning on over the past few months, but hopefully there'll be ones that I discussed today that maybe some new ideas that you're willing to try out. We're also going to talk a little bit about the role of resiliency, which really is a fancy word for bouncing back, and how we can build this into our life. And lastly, I'm going to give you some resources, and maybe that's a good time to take a screenshot of all the online programs that have been developed since March. Mental health issues are really getting center stage during this time, and for a good reason. So I'd like to start off with just the, might sound sort of not so professional, but it's the best thing I could come up with. It's okay not to be okay during a pandemic. The reality is that the longer this continues, the more we can expect to feel emotionally labile, which really just refers to rapid changes in our mood, where strong emotions or feelings can occur. Many people that I speak with for counseling tell me that they can go from, hey, things are going okay, to full-on panic with uncertainty in the next moment. On different days, we can experience different emotions. And again, as I mentioned, some days we can feel like things are going fairly well and we're on top of it, while other days we just may feel like we've hit the brick wall and it might be kind of hard to function. And that's pretty normal. And what can complicate this is if we're dealing, as I mentioned before, with other stressors. So it's really useful for us to know that the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs of our emotions are in fact quite consistent with dealing with a major life stressor, such as the one that we're all in. And just as we described the window, just as I described the window of tolerance a couple minutes ago, it's important to note that our window of tolerance can be quite narrow or wide, and that's different for everyone at different times, right? One of the most important elements of managing stress and the different emotions around this uncertain time is knowledge that just to acknowledge these emotions that we're experiencing. And we do have a good menu of them available to us humans. There's a real wide range of emotions and experiences. The big ones are fear and anxiety, which definitely occurs during times of change and uncertainty. But there's also frustration and loss of control that we can't do the things that we want to do and how we want to do them. For a lot of people, there's a lot of sadness around this and other losses. And these losses include things like loss of physical contact with the ones that we love, loss of freedom to enjoy group activities or other activities that we normally got a lot of pleasure out of. Missing of milestones. So many people have missed important events because of cancellations, such as weddings, and also celebrating lives that we've lost or remembering lives that we've lost. There's also practical losses. A lot of people are dealing with the stress of loss of income during this time. And then there's loneliness that many people are feeling because of all of these restrictions. I've heard of just recently heard of the term zoomed out. So the novelty of connecting virtually has really worn out for a lot of people, and that has resulted in people feeling a bit more lonely and isolated. If you've heard me speak before in one of our core talks back when we were running up at the Magna, one statement that I always like to tell people is that negative emotions are not a problem unless they're a problem. That while it's okay to be okay, it's really all about intensity and how it impacts our life. So while it's totally normal to experience all these ups and downs and ebbs and flows of emotions, as I just mentioned, we do need to be cautious. We do need to be aware to protect our own health and the safety of those around us. It's important to determine, are these thoughts, are these feelings taking over? Are they preoccupying our minds in a very intense way? Are they messing with our sleep? Are they messing with our focus? Are they impacting our relationships, right? Or if those around you, the people who you live with, if they notice, these might be indicators that more support would be helpful. So I encourage you to watch out for intensity of emotions and watch out for how they impact your life, your ability to function, and your relationships. It's also helpful for us to pay closer attention to the things that we do in response to stress and negative emotions. Sometimes we get it right and engage in activities that make us feel good and are good for us. But usually and normally, we all dip into those quick fixes, which are behaviors that are comfortable and easy, and behaviors that make us feel that, for the temporary, it reduces our feelings of stress or quiets down some of these negative emotions. But in the end, as we know, these can cause more damage on many fronts. Things like over or under eating, increased drinking, increased smoking, use of recreational drugs, zoning out in front of the TV or the computer, withdrawing from those that we love, sleeping too much, or perhaps lashing out and having angry outbursts. So the regular use of some of these quick fixes, that could also be a red flag that we need to change something, or maybe this is an opportunity for us to shift some gears to feel better, and that perhaps some more support can be helpful. What lies underneath those quick fixes that I just mentioned is other unhelpful ways of coping, such as avoiding and suppressing emotions. So, regular or excessive use of alcohol or recreational drugs or comfort food, these all act as a way to help numb uncomfortable or distressing emotions. But again, they never end up making us feel better or stronger for that matter. Excessive worrying, my goodness, if we could get paid for all the worrying we've been doing over the last few months, we would all be millionaires right now. But excessive worrying is something to watch out for as well, because while it's worrying is quite normal, when we're worrying most of the time, it could actually be a very unhelpful way of coping and helps us to try to kind of get rid of these distressing emotions instead of dealing with them and coping with them. Another thing is that we really cannot underestimate the impact of our negative self-talk, what we're saying to ourselves, and the role of negative self-judgment. So that also feeds into unhealthy ways of coping. So taking out your emotions finally on those around you, especially during these restrictions, can really make a difficult situation harder for you and definitely for your loved ones. So while experiencing these emotions is really just part of being human and as responding to the pandemic, using one of these ways and on the slide before to cope is again likely to cause your emotions to become more intense and last longer. So I'd encourage you to think a little bit about what are your go-tos. Are your coping strategies healthy or unhealthy? I don't really like to judge things as good and bad. I think we're all trying to keep it together. But look for small opportunities to change your responses so that they are feeding you, that they are making you feel stronger and better. So one way to change our response is to take control of what we can. But let's just point out the stuff that we can't control. There's a lot in this global pandemic that definitely impacts us, but which we really can't change very much. So those include things like the news, the actions of our leaders, cancellations of flights and trips that people have worked so hard to book, other people's reactions, other people's actions and behaviors. and the state of our healthcare system. These are things that are really pressing in our lives that we really can't do very much about, even though they impact us. So to manage this, it's helpful for us to look at the things that are in fact within our control, and find ways to make small decisions to give us some sense of power, to really fuel us in an important way. And these are what we're going to highlight for the rest of the talk now in terms of some coping strategies. The important reason to shift gears and try to, with purpose, spend more time on taking control or focusing on the things that we can't control, is that research shows that when we shift our focus to what we can control, we see meaningful and lasting differences in our well-being, and our health, and our performance. So these are a few strategies that tie into good coping strategies, and we're going to look at each of these individually. Of course, I'm sure that you have things to add to this blue circle around what you can control and what makes you feel good. So the first piece around taking back what you can control is planning a bit of an information diet. We have been glued to the news and these breaking news alerts for months now, and it is extremely important that we do keep up to date with news sources to again keep ourselves informed and keep ourselves safe. But we have to balance this out with the role that watching all of these news sources or media outlets, what role that plays on our mental health and our mood. And can we consider a little bit of an information diet? We don't like to use the word diet. I know Beata, our dietitian, definitely doesn't, because diet means restriction. But I'm encouraging you to consider, are you due for some information restriction? So one of the ways to do that is to, number one, seek credible information for important updates. So stay informed by checking information that are provided by credible sources and by experts. A lot of information that's disseminated about COVID-19 gets shared every day through multiple outlets, but not all of it is accurate. And again, I really encourage you to search out one or two reliable sources and just stick with those. And I'll leave it up to you to decide which are the most reliable sources for you, but the ones that we would support are non-for-profit organizations such as the World Health Organization, as well as information from our local government, as well as our federal government. But there are some really good news sites as well in the US. More importantly, I think it's important for us to find a balance. So while staying informed is helpful, we need to sort of recognize that too much information may not provide the extra benefit. So try to limit checking your sources of information to once per day, or even less if you can. This includes reading or listening to news stories about the pandemic. And even though things are shifting, and in many ways they are shifting rapidly, daily changes or moment by moment changes are not likely to affect how you should manage your risk. Finally, and the other part of planning an information diet is bringing an intentional mindset to unplugging. So set some time each day to completely unplug from all electronics, your phones, your tablets, your computers, just disconnecting for a while from social media outlets. You might need to schedule this to make sure it happens, but it really does a body and a mind really good. And you can replace that time with some fun and engaging activities that really give you a lot of self-care and that are healthy for you as well as those around you. And the good thing is that you get to choose what that is. Another way for us to cope better and to take control of what we can is to cultivate connection. We humans are social animals, even though some of us may be a bit more social than others. Why social support is important is that it really does an important job of reducing psychological distress, and our social supports help us adjust to life challenges. Those who have low social support really, we see this in research that they report more symptoms of depression and anxiety than those who have a good network of support. And it's not about numbers, it's about quality social support. So, I encourage you to connect with your community. I like this idea about your tribe. Even though it might feel small at times with all the physical distancing that we're hopefully adhering to, in many ways, we're all part of a larger community. We're all kind of banding together for the greater good and hopefully to get through this. But on a personal level, keep contact with those who you trust the most. Though connect with those who you want to connect with as often as you need to or like to, because it really helps to fuel your emotional tank in an important way. Maybe even consider reaching out to those who may need your help. But remember, support should not be a one-way street. So you want to make sure that you're not overburdened with the demands of others. So connect with others when you need it. And by now, most of us have had some experience with connecting virtually as we're doing today. But if you're feeling a little bit zoomed out, find ways to make plans to connect with others in person safely. So the warm weather summer came just at the right time does in fact make that easier. And lastly, I wonder if you could consider opening yourself up to new possibilities. Now, these might be really limited because, again, of physical distancing. And we definitely are not able to engage with new people in our usual ways, but there are some opportunities if we open ourselves up to this possibility, perhaps online workshops and programs, as well as options just within our own little neighborhoods and communities. I can tell you that personally, I have met and learned the names of more of my neighbors in the past 4 months and the names of their dogs than I have in the past 7 years I've lived in this home. And that's coming from a social worker. So there really is some possibilities in terms of cultivating connection, but it's definitely going to look different than the way we normally do it. Now for the hard stuff, changing the way we think. The way we look at situations and think about them is really important because it guides how we feel and what we do. So working to see our thoughts more clearly helps us put things into perspective and can really help reduce emotional strain and burnout. So our thoughts are shaped by lots of different factors, including our past experiences, our current knowledge about a situation, our values, our culture, our upbringing. And because of the way our thoughts show up in our minds, they really appear quite believable, and we often don't question them. And this can cause us some problems when our thoughts are based more on how we feel rather than actual facts. And again, if you've heard my core talk, you will hopefully remember my comment that you can't believe everything that you think. And this idea of monitoring self-talk refers to challenging our thoughts. And this is a really powerful technique that definitely helps reduce stress and anxiety. Because stress, anxiety, and even worry is best described as unhelpful thinking patterns that we experience when our mind fixates on the threat, the uncertainty, and negativity, which is really, really easy to do during this pandemic. It surrounds us for good reason. So thought challenging helps to broaden our focus to include the big picture, which really helps stabilize us. So I'm not suggesting that you force yourself to think good thoughts, right? But rather, it's important to note that just the act of paying attention to what we're saying to ourselves, almost like an outsider looking in, helps to determine how much these thoughts are adding to our stress level, and asking ourselves some questions to help develop more balanced ways of looking at the situation. So the steps to monitor your self-talk are up there on the PowerPoint. Notice your thoughts, so identify the situation, what you're saying to yourself, and how you're feeling about it. Take a step back. Consider what you're adding in. You may have heard me talk about the idea of thinking traps, such as all or nothing thinking, overgeneralizing, fortune telling, or the big common one of the shouldas and couldas that we kind of roll through our mind. Ask yourself, what am I saying to myself about this situation? Are there any other explanations? Am I trying to predict the future? And most of us are not great fortune tellers. Or am I asking myself a lot of what if questions? These can easily snowball and just fuel negative emotions. Put your thinking to the test. What are the facts? What experiences have we had that help us, say that this thought is not 100% true? Is there any other information that we don't know right now or aren't considering? Are there any positives or things that could help what we're ignoring? Or the big one is, what would you say to a friend in the same situation? These are all different ways of just checking in with our self-talk and coming up with a more balanced view. Here are some examples of how we can balance our self-talk by changing what I call the narrative. It's a major way we can take control back and feel calmer. And it involves being mindful about our feelings and being kind to ourselves, not judging the way you feel, and reminding yourself that there's no right or wrong way to feel about what's going on. This is a pandemic. This is new territory for all of us. And changing the narrative can really help us feel calmer and really soothe those strong emotions, kind of get back into smoother sailing waters in our window of tolerance, get us back in there. And acknowledging that it's okay to feel the way you're feeling instead of judging or criticizing yourself. So if you read some of these statements, I've been having, it's been a tough few days. I'm allowed to feel upset. That's perfectly normal and reasonable. These statements are self-validating, and this is a really important part of coping with difficult situations. We all have emotions for a reason, and some of us put that added pressure on ourselves to be strong or stay positive. And while of course having a positive attitude can really help some people, it's okay to feel worried, afraid, angry, and frustrated sometimes. Again, you're just watching out for that intensity. In fact, it makes sense to feel this way when we're dealing with such change and uncertainty around us. And sometimes if we put more pressure on ourselves to feel differently, we just might end up feeling worse. Starting a relaxation practice is really super important. You might have considered relaxation techniques in the cardiac rehab. We certainly talk about them a lot. But just as a reminder, relaxation techniques are more than just relaxing activities. These are exercises that help reset our nervous system. And relaxation techniques refer to the regular practice of one or more of a specific group of relaxation exercises. And these have been proven time and time again across the board in medical research to release the muscular tension that our body stores during times of stress. It helps reverse the stimulation caused by the stress response. It brings our system back into balance by deepening our breathing, reducing our stress hormone, slowing down our heart rate, our blood pressure, stabilizing our blood sugar, reducing pain and inflammation, relaxing our muscles. And it's also been shown to help alleviate symptoms of most chronic conditions that people are dealing with today. Added to the calming effects, the physical effects, the positive physical effects to our bodies, research also shows that the relaxation response also helps us with our energy, our focus, our mood, our problem-solving skills, and it helps boost motivation and productivity. We need all these things on a good day. We definitely need these benefits when we're trying to cope with a pandemic. So there's no right or wrong technique. You need to find the one that works for you. Many of them rather are very, very effective, and I've listed some of them here on the screen. But it's the one that you are able to do regularly that is going to benefit you the most. So consider that. The little image here talks about deep breathing in particular. Ignore the numbers. The numbers are 4, 7, 8. That's the way to divvy up the inhalation, where that refers to breathing in for 4 seconds, holding it for 7, and breathing out for 8. If you're new to deep breathing, I would just encourage you to breathe in for 3 seconds and at a comfortable rate, and then out through your mouth for 3 seconds. As that becomes more calming for you and more, and as you get used to it, then you can start deepening the breath by holding it in, right? And so diaphragmatic is really breathing. What it does is diaphragmatic breathing is really helpful, because what it does is it helps move away our shallow breathing, the way you and I are breathing right now, into our chest, and rather using our diaphragm, pulling that breath down. And just the act of a few deep breaths does a really good job at giving us a calming rhythm and again triggering that relaxation response and all those benefits that I mentioned to you before. All right, so resilience refers to moving through the challenges and strains that life throws our way, moving beyond the negative thinking and the discouragement in order to find new opportunities for life and for our own personal growth, right? And resiliency is, for some may consider it a personal attribute, the ability to bounce back. And if you weren't born with this, that's okay, because resilience can be built, resilience can be cultivated, and we can learn it. And so hopefully we'll take some of these ideas with you. So the first bit around building resiliency is finding ways to maintain structure in your day. It can really work wonders for your mental well-being. And many of you have probably found a new routine during the last few months. So routine helps us increase our sense of control. It helps diffuse feelings of overwhelm and our experience of stress. So having a bit of a plan for the day can be really, really helpful. And again, that can look different for everyone. So please don't compare yourself to others. Comparison is the greatest act of self-evil. But developing a routine that works for you can do a really good job at helping us find new opportunities for growth. We can consider starting with back to basics. Getting up and going to bed at the same time really helps reset our sleep-wake cycle. Just getting back to the basics around healthy eating, getting back to the basics around eating good food that makes us feel good, engaging in some regular physical activity. Again, I know our exercise therapists talk a lot about exercise, but as a social worker, I'm here to tell you that what's good for the heart is also good for the brain and the spirit. So that's the benefit of exercise. Again, it's important for us to look at healthy distraction techniques. It's great for us to find activities that just take our mind away for a little bit. So if you find that your mind is spiraling with unhelpful thoughts, distraction can be a really good way, an effective tool for helping us feel a bit better. It's important to note that distraction activity needs to be absorbing in some way so that it effectively reduces stress. So for example, many of us turn to our phone, to social media for distraction, and then next thing you know, we've been there for 3 hours and we're not feeling any better. So you'll really want to find activities that fuel your emotional tank. You want to target activities that give you a sense of joy, pleasure, accomplishment, satisfaction. Look at activities that trigger those feelings, because these distraction techniques, they have the added benefit of helping us feel happier, more motivated, more energized, and it also helps with boredom, which is another negative emotion that we really haven't talked about, which I'm sure has been center stage for many of us over the last few months. Another way to build resiliency is weaving in some mindfulness strategies to help us. Now, if you don't know a lot about mindfulness, and unfortunately, it's hard for me to summarize it without talking for an extra half an hour, and we do want to keep this time limited, but mindfulness is really about finding ways to stay in the present moment, which is a challenging thing for us busy minds to do. So, but two of the big foundations of mindfulness practice include kindness and gratitude. This is self-kindness, and these can be really helpful in building resiliency. In fact, research does show that cultivating a sense of gratitude and a sense of self-kindness has a ton of benefits, which include reducing stress and anxiety, boosting mood, and even strengthening our immune system and improving sleep. So look for the small things in your life that you can find each day to nurture a sense of gratitude. And this can be really tough on down days for sure. But a simple way to do this is to maybe spend a little bit of time, maybe at the end of the day, by keeping a bit of a log. What are the things that you're thankful for? Once we, start marking down the usual suspects, like I'm grateful that I have a roof over my head or family that loves me, we start getting into some nitty-gritty that really gives us an appreciation of what we have in our life, right? And then be kind to yourself. Can we be accepting that whatever we're going through is just a part of our process, is just a part of our journey. We're human. And it's about accepting these emotions without judgment. You might suddenly have a lot more on your plate. So just be mindful of your inner critic. Remind yourself that you can only do the best that you can. There's an opportunity here for meaning making and focusing on what matters most. So instead of waiting for things to get back to normal, can we redirect our focus on things that are bringing our life meaning right now? It's the things that bring you a sense of joy and satisfaction, contentment. These things that bring our life meaning are typically things that align with our values. So can we find a way to weave them in now? There might be some silver linings throughout this pandemic that we can also take the time to appreciate. And perhaps in some ways, while it's very challenging and mucking up many different parts of our life, perhaps this is also paving the way for something new and something exciting that we can learn from. And rather than waiting for things to get back to normal, being present in the moment, getting ourselves off of autopilot, it's a really, really important way for us to bounce back. When we spend time during our day doing what matters the most, we feel happier, we experience more joy, and have a greater sense of well-being. And where you can, offer assistance, reach out to people. We get a lot out of helping others. It gets us out of our own heads as well. But again, you just want to watch out for extending yourself too far. Be good to yourself and prioritize self-care. This is not being selfish. Being good to yourself will benefit the people around you, as well as that mind-body connection that's so important to our health. So I think that's it. I wanted to share with you some resources. Again, this might be a good time to get your phones out to take a picture, or if you'd like some more information, you can email us at cardiacrehab@southlakeregional.org, and I can send you this information if you would like it. There's some great online workbooks, online guides that you can work through on your own, specifically those that are talking about managing with COVID. That's the first two. Tolerance for Uncertainty. This was written by a psychologist in Ontario. It's a great workbook that you can download. It's in a PDF. And This Way Up is an Australian resource, but has a lot of great information and worksheets that you might find helpful. Wellness Together Canada is an initiative through the Ministry of Health, which is an excellent resource. It gives you different types of assessments, and it'll email you many different coping strategies or things that you can try to help manage the ups and downs in your mood. The Big White Wall is another ministry initiative. It's more of an online portal for people sharing sort of online their mental health concerns and getting peer support. And it's also monitored by your mental health professionals. Some online workshops that I'd like to share with you. Healthy Living Now, you might have been aware of it when we were operating out of the Magna and the Bradford Leisure Centre. They used to offer community in-person programs all throughout Ontario. Well, they're offering free virtual workshops that are general around coping with chronic conditions, but there's also specific ones for people dealing with diabetes, dealing with chronic pain, and one for people dealing with caregiver stress. So you can give this number a call or register online at this website. I'm not sure if you've heard about Coursera. It's free learning resources from the best universities around the world. And if you go into that website, you can type in what you're looking for and it'll spit out different courses, many of them for free. And then there are some online mindfulness programs if you're interested in practicing and learning more about that and building that to your day-to-day. Some apps, I wanted to share the ones that I know of that people like. These are apps most of us have a smartphone. Headspace, Unplug, Calm, and My Life. These are all free, but they will have those annoying pop-ups unless you give them some money. So use those at your discretion or find ones in your app store that you like a little bit better. You can play around with it for sure, but we have relaxation at our fingertips. And again, it's actually a sign of strength to recognize when we've hit our limit and need more support. Again, especially if you notice that real intensity of emotion hanging out more often than not and spilling over to the other important areas of your life, such as your self-care, your sleep, your relationships, your management of your health issues. So if you're noticing that you're feeling down, feeling depressed, feeling anxious and restless the majority of the week, so we're talking about more than a bad day, really reach out for support. I encourage you to speak with your family doctor. That is part of their job, and many of us can connect with our family doctors virtually, which is an added bonus, especially if we're feeling weary about going into in-person appointments. So it's really important that you speak with your doctor if you're noticing real intensity. As you know, I offer short-term one-to-one counseling during your time with us at the cardiac rehab. So please feel free to reach out to me, either through our email or emailing me directly, or you can give me a call. I will be offering my stress mood management class. Plans are in place to get it a closed group sometime in the fall, so you can watch for more details on that on our regular emails for you. If you were registered for a group, for the group or the mindfulness group, and that was canceled because of the closure, we will contact you, so watch out for that. I also have on the screen some resources through the CMHA. They offer virtual counseling programs, and also a program called Bounce Back, which is a free telephone-based skill building program which helps manage the symptoms of mild to moderate depression, anxiety, and stress. And so you can give them a call or look on their website for more information. Okay, Michelle, do we have any questions or comments that I can give some voice to?
Not right now, no.
Not right now?
No.
We'll hold it for a bit. I did a lot of talking. There's a lot of information to take in. This will be recorded, so feel free to watch it again or to share it with anyone. Tour of the inflammatory food plan. Yeah. We are hearing a lot about certain foods causing inflammation and really kind of wreaking havoc on our bodies. So Beata will give you some strategies of how you can purposely maybe shift some of your food choices to help you feel better physically. And thank you so much for tuning in. And please do not hesitate to reach out to anyone here on the team, myself included, if you would like some more information or if we can be helpful during your rehab. Thank you.